Okay, good good to see everyone. Inshallah, we're going to go back to our class. We've been talking about shaytan and some of the meanings of shaytan. And what we talked about the last couple of days, or the last couple of classes, because we had class yesterday and then we missed a couple of days before that. But what we talked about the last couple of days was the idea that one of the ways to think about shaytan is that shaytan represents an aspect of our own selves that we have to battle with constantly, that it's not just an outside force that's trying to take over us, but in actuality, it's a force that exists within us that we're in constant battle with, right? And we mentioned a couple verses to support that idea. For one, when we mentioned the story of Musa, when Musa killed the person, and he said, "Hada min amal shaytan." He said, "This is from the work of shaytan." But then in the very next ayah, he said, "Inni zalamtu nafsi." He said, "I wronged myself." Right? So that makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because if we just attribute everything we do to shaytan in the sense that there's this external force that's pushing us to do things, then where does that leave room for us to have personal responsibility? Is it okay for us just to blame someone or something that exists outside of us for the things that we do? So that's a good argument, at least in my very humble opinion, to say that perhaps we should think about shaitan from the perspective of a part of our own selves that we constantly have to battle with, to struggle against, right? Um, yeah, we started with our nafs, right, and we looked at also how the description of shaitan, as far as what shaitan orders, is the same basically as what the nafs orders, the nafs, or the human soul. So, for example, shaitan is described as ya'murukum bisu'i. He orders or commands you with evil. And the nafs, the human soul, is also described as ammaratun la ammaratun bisu'i, something that perpetually commands evil. And also the nafs whispers to waswisu bihi nafsuhu. Allah describes it. We're going to actually look at that a little bit more today. But the nafs to waswisu, whispers, and also shaitan is described as was with waswasa. So when we look at some of those connections, right, as we did yesterday, also with the brothers of Yusuf, that's another place that we looked at that connection between shaitan and our own nafs, is because Yusuf's father Yaqub, when the brothers of Yusuf threw him in a well and plotted against him and wanted to get rid of him, and even plotted to potentially kill him, when they came back to their father and lied to their father about what actually happened, what did their father say? Sawwalat lakum anfusukum amra. That it was your own selves that made this matter easy for you. But then in the end of the story, Yusuf said what? Min ba'di an nazagha shaytanu bayni wa bayna ikhwati. He said that it was after shaitan had brought about enmity between myself and my brothers. So the father Yaqub attributed what they did to their own selves, where Yusuf attributed what happened to shaitan, right? So that's not a contradiction, because potentially shaitan is a description of, or an aspect of, our own nafs that we have to constantly battle with and constantly struggle against, right? So that's a little bit about what we talked about the last couple times. So yesterday we also talked about some of the linguistic meanings, some of the language meanings of the word, of the root word, shatana. So qarin is something else we should study. Inshallah, we'll come to that word, because I intend for this to be an ongoing study for at least a few days, because there's other words that are connected to this that we still have to study. We have to study Iblis. We haven't really went into depth about that yet. Qarin is an important one that comes up in this, because he references shaitan as a qarin, someone who has been connected or joined to you, right? وَمَنْ يَكُنِ الشَّيْطَانُ لَهُ قَرِينًا فَسَاءَ قَرِينًا. For example, he says in one ayah that whoever shaitan is a qarin for that person, is a companion or someone who has been connected or joined with that person, فَسَاءَ قَرِينًا. Then what an evil qareen, what an evil companion for that person. Right. نُقَيِّدْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِين. That's another ayah, but if you go to the beginning, wa alaykum salam, you go to the beginning of the ayah, why is that the result? He says, وَمَنْ يَعْشُ عَنْ ذِكْرِ الرَّحْمَنِ نُقَيِّدْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِين. He said, whoever becomes blind from the dhikr of Ar-Rahman, the remembrance or the consciousness of Ar-Rahman, نُقَيِّدْ لَهُ شَيْطَانًا. We connect or bind to him a shaytan, فَهُوَ لَهُ قَرِين. Then he is a qareen, he becomes a qareen. So this word qareen is also a word that we want to go a little bit more in depth about. But today we're just going to focus on a couple things. So number one, like I said yesterday, if we go to the language meaning of the word shaytan and we go back to the 3-letter root shatana, even though some people think that the 3-letter root is actually shayata, wa alaikum salam, but we talked a lot about the 3-letter root shatana, sheen, ta, and nun, and it could really possibly or potentially be either root word, right? But shatana, but they both, if you look at the root meanings of each word, they both kind of interrelate. But if you look at the word shatana, oh yeah, subhanAllah, the talk yesterday, if you look on YouTube, it's posted on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, so you can see what we talked about yesterday. So shatana, the root meaning of that word in Arabic, what did we talk about yesterday? It means bu'd. It means for something to be far or for something to be at a distance, right? So I want to add a couple things to that today. So one scholar of Arabic named Abu Ubaidah, he actually described the word shaytan by saying, Ismun li kulli arimin min al-jinni wal-insi wal-hayawanat. He says that the noun shaytan can be a noun or a name that's used to describe anything that is powerful, violent, or stubborn, whether from jinn, from human beings, or from even animals. So this scholar of Arabic, Abu Ubaidah, he adds to our understanding of what we were talking about the last couple times we met and talked about this topic, that the idea of shaytan is an idea that can apply to many different things. Wa alaikum salam. It doesn't just only refer to it doesn't just only refer to this entity that is like hidden and exists somewhere outside of you, because he says likulli arimin, ismun likulli arimin. It's a noun or a name for anything that is powerful, violent, or stubborn, whether that's jinn, wa alaikum salam, ins, human beings, or even animals. So an animal that's powerful, violent, or it's hard to tame, in just from the Arabic language usage, we can call this a shaytan, right? So that shows us also from a language standpoint that when we use the term shaytan, it doesn't only just refer to something that's invisible outside of ourselves, right? And then another scholar of Arabic who wrote a book about the vocabulary of the words of the Quran, and that book is called Al-Mufradat. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's called Al-Mufradat, and this scholar, the scholar's name is Ar-Raghib Al-Asfahani. So Ar-Raghib Al-Asfahani actually says also, وَسُمِّيَ كُلُّ خُلُقٍ ذَمِيمٍ شَيْطَانًا. He says that every blameworthy quality is called a shaytan. So any blameworthy quality that a person might have, wa alaikum salam, we can call that quality a shaytan. Like, for example, what's a blameworthy quality? Like if a person is very selfish, for example, don't want to help people, it's just all about themselves, we can call that quality a shaytan. That is a shaytan quality that exists within us. So he said, لِكُلِّ سُمِّيَ كُلُّ خُلُقٍ ذَمِيمٍ shaytanan, that every blameworthy quality is called a shaytan. Okay, so this just shows us different usages of this word, that it doesn't just apply to some entity that exists outside of us that we're not able to see. Also, in a very famous Arabic dictionary, called Lisan al-Arab. So this is a very famous and extensive Arabic dictionary, very comprehensive Arabic dictionary. That's why it's a really good reference, because the author of this dictionary gives you many different examples of the usage of whatever word that you're studying in the Arabic language. And the author's name is Ibn Mandur. So he wrote a book called Lisan al-Arab. And under the entry for this root word, shaytana, one of the things, he mentions many different things, but one of the things that he mentions about this that I thought was really interesting, he says that a shaytan, so if we just use this word as a noun, a shaytan, what does this mean? I didn't mean to leave you on a cliffhanger, but I was a little thirsty there. I had to get some water. He says that a shaytan is al-habl. وَقِيلَ الْحَبْلُ الشَّدِيدُ الْفَتَلِ. He said that the word in Arabic, ash-shaytan, means a rope, like a rope. And he said it's also said that, وَقِيلَ, it's also said, الْحَبْلُ الشَّدِيدُ الْفَتَلِ. It's a rope that has been very tightly and strongly bound, right? So you know when you take the rope and you entwine the different strands to make it, right? So he's saying a shaytan in Arabic, one of the usages of it is it means a rope that has been very tightly bound. And this rope is a strong rope that you use, for example, to tie up horses with. It's called a shaytan, from the same root word as shaytan. So that's another interesting thing that I found, because if you think about that being part of the root meaning, right? Wa alaikum salam. So then perhaps also that helps us understand this idea of shaytan as a part of our own selves. So it's a part of our own selves that is trying to bind us and hold us back. Like just like you tie up a horse from doing what it naturally does, from being able to go out and run and stuff like that. Possibly something with breathing into knots. That's a good question. That's something we can talk about further, right? But I thought that was an interesting part of the language meaning of shaytan and the related root words. Shaytan is a rope that has been very strongly intertwined, and you use it to tie up horses. Another thing too, to show the flexibility of this word, is there is actually a hadith, right, that uses this word in a really interesting way. It says, الراكب شيطان والراكبان شيطانان والثلاثة ركب. So what that means is, the hadith is basically giving advice about traveling and not traveling alone, because it makes sense if you think about the time period when most likely these hadith were set in, which was a time that existed before the modern travel technology that we have today, right? Where you had to travel long distances through deserts and things that would have been more dangerous. So it's giving advice about traveling alone. And it says, Ar-Rakib Shaytan, that the one who's riding alone is a shaytan. War-Rakibani Shaytanani. And two people that are just riding by themselves are two shaytans. Wa-Thalathatu Rakbun. But three is a caravan or a traveling party. So it's just a hadith giving advice about being safe in your travels. That if you're going to travel a long distance where it might get dangerous, then go with a couple other people. So that way, if something happens to one person, or you have a sufficient amount of people to handle different difficulties that might come up. But what's interesting is the language use of shaytan in this hadith, to show that the word shaytan is a flexible word that can apply to a lot of different things. Because he said, Ar-Rakib Shaytan, that one rider alone is a shaytan. Perhaps, potentially meaning, because remember we said from the root meaning of shatana means to be far or distant. So Ar-Rakib is a shaytan. The one riding alone is distant from being safe, potentially. War-Rakibani Shaytanani, same thing, like two people just riding by themselves, right, are two shaytans. They're distant from being safe. But when وَالثَّلَاثَةُ رَكْبٌ, but three is a traveling party. So these are a couple of the interesting language usages of the word shaytan that I wanted to add to what we talked about yesterday. Now, a couple other verses from the Quran that I want to share with you about this is chapter 2, verse 14. So, chapter 2, verse 14. Actually, it's interesting because I was just reciting these ayat right before it when we began the live today. So, chapter 2, verse 14 is telling us about the hypocrites. So, if you read the context, so if we go back a few verses to verse 8, you can see what the context actually is. It says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَقُولُ آمَنَّا بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. And from amongst people are those who say, we have believed in Allah in the last day, while they are not believers. Right? So it's talking about hypocrites. They say we believe in Allah in the last day, while they are not believers. يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ. They seek to deceive Allah and those who have believed, while they do not deceive anyone except themselves, while they don't perceive it. فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ مَرَضٌ فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا. In their hearts is a disease, so Allah has increased their disease. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ. And they have a painful punishment for بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ, because they used to lie. Okay, now that's verse 10. So let's skip down. I just wanted to show you the context of what's being talked about. So when you skip down to verse 14, in verse 14, look at how it describes them. He says, وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. And when they meet those who have believed, they say, we have believed. وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ قَالُوا إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُسْتَهْزِئُونَ. So when they meet those who have believed, they say, we have believed. But when they are alone with their shayateen, shayateen is the plural of what? Shayateen is the plural of the word shaytan. So I think sometimes people even translate this verse as when they are alone with their devils. I just want to, I always do that. I always, just out of curiosity, I like to see how other people translate things. So, yeah, here he translates it as when they are alone with their devils, shayateen, right? I'm just trying to see if he has any other, yeah. So his footnote here is interesting. He says, by their devils are meant their evil companions, as plainly stated in verse 76. We're going to that verse. I already got that in my notes, right? And then he gives another note here. He says that by their devils are meant their leaders in unbelief. And other people say by their devils are meant those men who made themselves like the devils in their insolence and rebellion. In fact, the word shaytan signifies every insolent or rebellious one from among the jinn and the men and the beasts and the animals, which is, well, I already quoted that definition earlier when we first started. So that's from his perspective. But I just wanted to show you how in this verse, it's talking about the hypocrites, and it's talking about how, it's talking about how when they meet those who believe, they say they believe. But then when they go back to their shayateen, it doesn't reference them as, like, it doesn't even make specific that they are shayateen of people, because in some verses it says shayateen al-insi wal-jinn, devils of humans and jinn. But here it just says their devils, right? So from that, we can understand, as he mentioned, that these are evil companions that they had, or people that were encouraging them to plot against believers, because there's other ayat in the Quran like that, right? So it's really interesting that the word shayateen here, right in the beginning of the Quran. So even if you think about it, right, this verse, this is 2:14. So if you think about it, right, the whole discussion of Iblis and Adam and that whole thing that took place doesn't even start until verse 30, right? So, and then the first reference you get to a shaytan in that context is in verse 36. Because before that it's Iblis, and then in 36 it goes to shaytan. And that's something I hope to cover tomorrow. Why does it go from Iblis to shaytan? That's something we're gonna talk more about, the meaning of Iblis. But for right now, I just want to point that out. that the verse that we just read is verse 14. That's the first mention of shaytan or shayateen. And then the first time we see shaytan in reference to the story of Adam is in verse 36. So if you can imagine, could it be the idols they worshipped as well? Possibly, but when they meet those who believe, they say we believe. And then when they are alone with their shayateen, they say we are really with you. Inna ma'akum, innama nahnu mustahzi'un. We are only mocking. I see why you're saying that maybe it's their idols, and possibly, I don't want to say it's not, but we're going to go to another verse in this same surah that I believe will show that it's not. It's talking about actual human beings. It's not talking about like idols, and Allah knows best. But what I want to point out before we do that is, like I was saying, if you were to pick up the Quran and just read it from the beginning, right? Say you knew nothing about the Quran and you were just reading the Quran from the beginning, the first time you would come across the concept of shaytan or shayateen is in verse 14. And it seems to be, and Allah knows best, talking about people. And what supports this, I think, is if you look at the language that's being used, right? Because he says, when they are alone with their shayateen, when they're alone with their devils. And then you go to verse 276, it has a very, very similar wording, okay? So 214, let's read it one more time so you can compare the wording. In 214, he says, and when they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. And when they are alone with their devils, they say, we are with you. We were only mocking. Now, look at how similar that is to verse 76. 276. He says, وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. And when they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. See how it starts the same way? When they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. وَإِذَا خَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ. And when they are alone with each other, see how the Quran explains itself. Like, listen to that really closely. In 2:14, it says, وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. And when they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. This is 2:14. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ قَالُوا إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ. And when they are alone with their devils, they say, we are with you. Now listen to 276. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. Listen how similar it is. And when they meet those who believe, they say, we have believed. وَإِذَا خَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ. But when they are alone with each other. See, so 14 said when they are alone with their devils. Here it says when they are alone with each other. قَالُوا, they say, أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. Will you speak to them or tell them about what Allah has opened upon you of knowledge, لِيُحَاجُّوكُمْ بِهِ عِنْدَ رَبِّكُمْ, so that they might argue with you by that in front of your Lord. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you not have any sense? Yeah, isti'adha is definitely essential. We studied that actually one time in one of the Discord classes, and the video for that is on my YouTube page. If you want to review what we talked about, but we can talk about it again specifically in this class. But when you put those two verses together, 214 and 276, I think that lends a very strong probability that what's being talked about in 214 when it says shayatinihim, they're devils, it's talking about people, the people that they associated with. So right here from the beginning of the Quran, we can see that the word shaytan or the plural shayateen, wa alaykum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh wa maghfiratuhu wa ridwanuhu. I always love when you come on and give that salam. I don't know why I really like it, so I always try to stop and make sure I respond to it completely. So we see right from the beginning of the Quran that shayateen and shaytan both have a heavy reference towards human beings, right? So that's something to add to the other things that we've studied that connect the nafs, the soul, with aspects of shaytan, to say that potentially, and Allah knows best, shaytan is an aspect of our own selves, right? So we all have those different aspects. We all have um, those different parts of ourselves, those different bad characteristics that could be described as Ar-Raghib al-Asfahani said, as I quoted in the beginning. He said, "Summiya kullu khuluqin dhamimin shaytanan," that every bad characteristic, every blameworthy characteristic could be called a shaitan. So we all have those. We all have those blameworthy characteristics, or those characteristics that we would like to not have, that we would like to eliminate. And those characteristics can be called a shaitan. Now, when a person has those characteristics to such a degree that they predominate that person as a whole, right? Then that whole person can be called a shaitan. Just like in the beginning of the Quran, certain people are called shayateen. They're devils, speaking about human beings, right? But that's when the whole person, at least it seems like, in Allah knows best, when the whole person becomes dominated by these bad characteristics. So another thing that we want to add to this today is we want to talk about the idea of waswas. So the idea of waswas, which is translated as whispering. So I was looking at some of the Arabic meanings for this. One of the Arabic meanings that I found for this, which I thought was very interesting, is one of the meanings that they give for this in Arabic is Sawtul Hali, or the sound that jewelry makes, is one of the language usages for the word waswas that we translate in Arabic, or in the Quran, as whispering, like the whispering of shaitan. Waswas, the sound that jewelry makes. So meaning, like, if you have a bracelet on or some jewelry, you know how it makes that like ting ting, like the tingling sound. Tingling, I don't know if that's the right way to describe it. Jingling, whatever the sound is. I don't know exactly what the sound is, but you know how it makes that sound. So I thought that's kind of an interesting Arabic language usage for the word waswas, because to me that gives you the sense of, it's like a quieter sound, but you kind of hear it, and it's kind of like background noise. And also, it's not a productive sound, right? Like tinkling or something like that, right? It's not a productive sound, right? What I mean by it's not a productive sound is, when you make sounds to convey a message, they have to be organized in a certain way to make meaning, right? But when you just hear like static or white noise or something like that, they're non-productive sounds, meaning they don't really produce a meaning. That's why they're called noise. So they're unorganized. Alhamdulillah, thank you. Yeah. Oh yeah, subhanAllah, I have to check that out. It's funny you mentioned Eckhart Tolle. I don't have Eckhart Tolle right here, but I have. You familiar with him? Meister Eckhart. So close. I have an Eckhart, but yeah, no, I have to check that out. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that, the pain body concept, but I will definitely check that out. So I like, first of all, to start off with this idea of waswas. I like this idea that in Arabic, one of the ways that that's used in the Arabic language is for the sound that jewelry makes, because it's kind of a disorganized sound. Can I mimic the sound of jewelry? I'm not trusting that. I'm thinking you want to record that and like use that in a sound bite or something. Nah, I don't know what's going on right now. You trying to set me up? I'm just joking. I don't know what's it called. Ting 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 ting. I don't know. Do I have some jewelry around here? I'm not really a jewelry person. Ting 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 ting. Yeah, I'm not really a jewelry person. I have a watch and I have my wedding ring, and that's it. I don't really get into like wearing a lot of jewelry. That's not really my thing. I never like that. I don't hate on anyone that does though. To each his own. If it fits you and you like it, do you? But that's just not me. I don't know. I just don't like having a bunch of stuff on me. I don't even like having a lot of stuff in my pockets. I like to be mobile, flexible. You never know when you might have to dip. See, you guys got me in silly mode, man. Let me get back to what we're doing here. What are we doing here? What were we talking about? Does anybody remember? Oh, the um so we were talking about West West. Some of the meaning of West West uh has to do with Sotul Hali. It has to do with the sound that jewelry makes. So I like that for a couple different reasons. One of those I already mentioned, which is the idea that it's a sound that doesn't really have meaning to it, right? It doesn't have a productive meaning. So it reminds me of the difference in information theory when they talk about the difference between signal and noise. So signal is something that gives you a meaning that you can take the meaning and understand it. But anything that's noise is something that just gives you sounds, but it doesn't really come together in an organized way to produce a meaning. So waswas is kind of like that because it makes your thinking disorganized, right? So I kind of like that way of thinking about it. But also I like the fact that it's related to the sounds that jewelry makes because also in some verses of the Quran, shaitan is described with tazyin, salam, with tazyin, with beautifying things, right? Beautifying bad actions or bad qualities. So I like that idea too because he makes the bad things have like jewelry, where they look good, they seem good. We rationalize them, but in actuality, they're not all that good. So I thought that Arabic meaning of the word waswas is a really beautiful way of thinking about it. Another thing I want to mention about waswas, the fly that don't leave you alone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. It's just like annoying. And another thing too, this is another important thing about the word waswas and about Arabic in general. So in a number of our classes, we've talked about one of the qualities of the Arabic language, especially the language of the Quran, is that even the letters themselves have meaning, right? Even the sounds of the letters have meaning. So even when you say the word was, you hear that the S sound. It's like a very uh, like high pitched sound, or it's a very like it's very quiet, like sneaky sound. It almost sounds like "Walaikum salam." It almost sounds like a whisper, like when you whisper was. So this is another characteristic of Arabic, and especially the Arabic of the Quran. Yeah, it's like mimicking the sound, right? So it's mimicking the sound of a whisper, and I think that's really interesting. In English, we have a name for that. We call it onomatopoeia. I had to make sure I remember how to say that right, which is where the word mimics the sound, right? Yeah, the sound effects, the sound effects, right? But yeah, that's a characteristic of Arabic. You see that the sound of the word actually follows along with the meaning. So you hear in the word waswas, right? It sounds like a whisper, right? It sounds like how it sounds when you whisper. So that's one thing. Another thing is that when you hear the the letters of an Arabic word, you find this in the Quran sometimes, where the letters of an Arabic word will be repeated, like this was. And what that does too is that gives us an additional meaning, which means that there is something continuous going on here. That this is a continuous action. That's why the sound is continually repeated. Was. So it's like the was, this continuous whispering and suggesting and stuff like that is an ongoing thing that we have to constantly battle with and work against. And that's a description of our own nafs. He said, as I mentioned already, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ. That we created the human being and we know what his own self to waswisu. Oh, the sound of flip flops. I like that. But look at that English word. See, this tells you something about how language in general works, right? Why do we call them flip flop? See how the repetition of that sound, flip flop. It mimics the repetition of the action of when you walk and you hear the sound of the flip flop, right? That's actually really a tick tock. Yeah, tick tock, like the clock, tick tock, right? Exactly. That's a characteristic of language in general. So unbearable in a quiet room, right? Uh, but so you see how that works even in language in general. So when you see that in Arabic, you'll see that a lot of times there's different examples in the Quran where the word will be repeated, right? Dakkan dakka, the word will be repeated, right? So was. It's this continuous action going on. It's not just one time. It's something that you always have to deal with. To waswisu bihi nafsuhu, that a person's nafs to waswisu continually is suggesting things. So it's interesting. So this word waswasa, let's look at the I was trying to I'm going to address this comment because it seems like you're not that good at taking hints. We're having a class. That's not really the place to discuss that. If you want to discuss that, you're free to email me and we can have a discussion about that. Just out of respect, I would think being a part of any class, you would respect what's going on. I would have thought that. But so hopefully, inshallah, that answers your question. You're free to email me. We can discuss it. Much love. Assalamu alaikum. So waswas is used in 5 verses of the Quran. Let me make sure I'm counting that right. Yeah, 5 verses of the Quran. Variations of that word. Yeah, alhamdulillah. So let's look at some of these verses to get a better understanding of it. So one interesting thing, first of all, I want to start here. Let's go to chapter 7, verse 20. So chapter 7, verse 20. Chapter 7, verse 20 is talking about the story of Adam. So chapter 7, verse 20, in talking about the story of Adam and his Zoj, right? It says, فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا الشَّيْطَانِ. So ash-shaytan waswasa lahuma. Ash-shaytan whispered to them, or for them actually. So I want to show you something really interesting about the language of the Quran. So the language of the Quran is so precise. Let me show you this wording here. So waswasa lahuma. So the phrase here is waswasa lahuma. Okay. So waswasa we know means to whisper. We talked about that, right? But what does lahuma mean? So lahuma, what does this word mean? Lahuma. So lahuma means literally for them. And the them here means two people. So for waswasa, meat means you're talking about lahm. Lahm, okay? Lahuma is the word. Lahm is meat, right? For waswasa lahuma. So what is the meaning of waswasa lahuma? So lahuma means for them. The la part is for, and huma is those two. Huma in Arabic means those two. Lahuma. Okay? So let's pause on that for a second. I want to take you to another verse. For waswasa lahuma. Okay? Now, if we go to chapter 20, verse 120. Chapter 20, verse 120. Chapter 20, verse 120 says, فَوَسْوَسَ إِلَيْهِ الشَّيْطَانِ قَالَ يَا آدَمَ. So, shaytan waswasa ilayhi. Shaytan whispered to him and said, "Oh Adam," and then the rest of it. Okay. Now let me show you the difference. For waswasa ilayhi. Waswasa ilayhi. Okay. What does ilayhi mean? Ilayhi means to him. For waswasa ilayhi, to him. Okay. Now, the question that comes up between these two verses, when scholars talk about these two verses, is why does one verse say waswasa lahuma, he whispered for them, and it uses the dual pronoun huma, meaning two people, huma, for them. And this verse that we just read says waswasa ilayhi, to him, meaning shaytan, and meaning Adam. I'm sorry, to him, meaning Adam, and it's referencing only one person. What's the difference between those two verses? What's the difference between those two verses, and why in one verse does it say to them both or for them both? Okay, I'll say the question again because it might have been confusing because I mixed the words up a little bit. So when you look at the story of Adam and his Zoj, Adam and his other half, okay, and the idea of waswasa, the shaitan whispering in regards to them, okay, you find in two different verses it's described differently. In one verse, the one wording that I put up, waswasa lahuma, that he whispered for them both, lahuma, not ilayhima, not to them both, for them both. But then in the other verse, when it talked about Adam, he said waswasa ilayhi, he whispered to him individually. So why does it mention in one verse that he whispered to him individually, but then in another verse it says he whispered for them both, to him and for them both? Why? So if you look at, like I said, if you look at what different scholars say about that, they have different opinions about that. So I'll give you one suggestion, and Allah knows best. So if you look at the Quranic viewpoint, yeah, you're kind of hitting along where I'm going to. The difference between the Quranic viewpoint, at least Allah knows best from what I understand, the difference between the Quranic viewpoint about the story of Adam and his Zoj and the biblical viewpoint. The biblical viewpoint blames Eve, right? But the Quranic viewpoint does not blame the woman, even if you want to say she was a woman, because in the Quran, it calls Adam and his Zoj, his other half. So that's a whole different thing to talk about, right? But that's a side point. Because the Quran, my Spotify is Misfit Muslim podcast. I have a link tree in my bio, so if you go on the link tree, you should be able to find it. Okay, so that's one thing. The biblical version puts the burden or puts the blame on Eve, right? Now, the Quranic version doesn't do that. I said the Misfit Muslim podcast is the name. Yeah, is the name of the podcast. But also, if you go in my bio on TikTok, there's a link tree and it'll take you right to it. So the biblical version, right, blames the woman, blames Eve. Yeah, they're out strong today, huh? That's okay. Alhamdulillah. I normally wouldn't even address any of the comments. That's not even my style. But the person, I figured after a while they would just kind of take the hint, but they didn't. So I was like, let me go ahead and try to calm this down, because it seems like he's getting a little upset there. So we want to try to keep it positive, and we want to try to stay focused on the class. So when it comes to the biblical story, it blames Eve, right? It blames the woman. But the Quranic story does not. The Quranic story actually puts the burden on Adam, right? That Adam is the one who forgot. Okay? So now let's start with that point, right? And if you want to see that, let's go to this verse here that we just read, which is chapter 20, verse 120, where it says, فَوَسْوَسَ إِلَيْهِ الشَّيْطَانِ. So shaitan whispered to him, to Adam, قَالَ يَا آدَمُ. He said, O Adam, هَلْ أَدُلُّكَ عَلَى شَجَرَةِ الْخُلْدِ وَمُلْكٍ لَا يَبْلَى. He said, shall I guide you to the tree of eternity and a dominion or a kingdom that never wears away or that never leaves. فَأَكَلَا مِنْهَا. So they both ate from it. So look at this. We have to, whenever it comes to the language of the Quran, we have to, inshallah, email me, please. We have to look very closely at the wording. Okay, look at this wording in chapter 20, verse 120. He whispered to him, a shaytan whispered to him, and said, "O Adam, shall I guide you to this and this and that?" And then in verse 121, who ate from it? They both ate from it. فَأَكَلَا مِنْهَا. They both ate from it. And even if you go up to verse 115, it says, وَلَقَدْ عَهِدْنَا إِلَىٰ Adam. We gave our covenant to Adam min qablu, from before. فَنَسِيَ. So he forgot. وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. And we didn't find from him any azman, any determination. 21:15, not 2. Chapter 20, verse 115. Okay, so when you read this, right? When you read this context, who do you come away with feeling like? Who do you? The lives are 2 p.m. Eastern time. Salam. 2 p.m. Eastern time. So when you read this context, who do you come away feeling like has the burden, right? It sounds like Adam, right? Doesn't that sound like Adam is the one who's responsible here or has the burden or who is the one who made the mistake? But they both ate from it. Okay, so now let's put this together. In one verse, it says he whispered to him, to Adam, but they both ate for it. Both ate from it. In the other verse, it says, فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا. He whispered for them. Okay, so follow me here. He whispered to Adam, but he did it with the intention of getting both of them. You follow my point? That's how I think you put the verses together. That waswasa ilayhi, he directed his waswasa to Adam individually, right? But his goal wasn't just Adam by himself. His goal was both of them. For waswasa lahuma. He whispered for both of them. Follow my point? He didn't whisper to his Zoj directly. He whispered to Adam. But the purpose of whispering to Adam was for Adam potentially maybe to influence his Zoj or whatever the case may have been. The purpose of the whispering to Adam was to include both of them, to get both of them. Does that make sense? Do you see how I put that together, or why I put it together like that? Because when you look at the verses, right? When you look at the verses, the verse that mentions both of them doesn't say. The verse that mentions both of them, yeah. I don't even want to say that. I know that's how some people would even take that. They would say, "Oh, so that means it's a man's role to lead." No, absolutely not. I wouldn't even put it like that. I wouldn't even look at it as a gender thing, because if you look at it as a gender thing, then there's a whole different issue that we have to talk about. The fact that Adam was the one who forgot and the one who had weak determination. So if you look at it as a gender thing, then in that case, what does that say even about the man? How is he the leader, right? So I wouldn't even put it on that level, thinking about it as a gender thing. Because was it a gender thing? Because it's talked about Adam and his Zoj, his other half. So personally, I wouldn't even think about it on that level. I would just think about it as this is how social relationships work, right? Sometimes people don't have to influence the whole group. They can influence one person and ideas start to spread, right? So when we think about it in the traditional way, then we're always thinking about this dichotomy of gender, of like man and woman, and he was a man and she was a woman. So either way, we end up with the opposite side of the biblical problem. The biblical problem blames the woman, but then if we interpret this story as, well, the man influenced the woman, then it's still kind of making the woman look bad. So I think, no, like, why do we have to always think in those terms? I think we should free ourselves from thinking in those terms and think about it in a more universal perspective. That as human beings, we're always subject to influence, whether you're a man or a woman. We're always subject to influence from the people that we associate with, right? The people that we trust. So I want to, along those lines, I want to share with you It's actually in this same chapter. This is something very interesting that I think a lot of times people might not pay attention to. And if you go back to what verse is it? It's verse 87 and 88. It's in the same chapter. So chapter 20, verse 87 and 88. Chapter 20, verse 87 and 88. And this is in relationship to yeah, exactly. Is woman an extension of man, or is man a simplified version? That's why I said you have to be careful with trying to immediately like think about it in terms of gender, because Allah talked about Adam as having forgot and lacking determination. So if you're thinking about it only in those terms, that doesn't make, if you're a man, it doesn't make you look too good. And even the male in Arabic is called what? Dhakar. Dhakar, right? That's how you say male in Arabic. Dhakar, right? But did you ever notice something before I show you this verse right here? Did you ever notice this? That male in Arabic is dhakar, right? Dhakar, right? Dhakar. That's male in Arabic. But what is remembrance in Arabic is dhikr. So one of the ways, same root as dhikr. And how was Adam, what was Adam described as in this verse? Nesiya. He forgot. So the male is in need of remembrance, in need of someone to remind him, because Adam forgot. So if you start thinking about it in terms of gender, you can go a whole different route with that. So I would say, I don't think we should put the blame on a gender. We should the female is untha, right? We should, I think, personally think about it in terms of social relationships, right? Rijal or rajul is man, dhakar is male, okay? Rajul comes from the root word meaning leg, right? But that's a whole different discussion where all these words come from. But what I want to share with you here is verse 87 and 88, because we're talking about social relationships. And untha, I believe, I'm trying to remember exactly. I believe it has to do with being soft, if I recall correctly. Let's see real quick if I can find that for you. I looked at it some time ago, but I haven't studied it in a while. So I don't remember it exactly off the top of my head, but I think that's what it is. Let me see. See if he gives anything here. Interestingly, he says, وَقَدْ يُقَالُ إِنَّ الْأَصْلَ فِي هَذِهِ الْمَادَّةِ هُوَ اللِّينُ. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. He says that it's said that the root of this word untha is from alin, which means to be soft or malleable or something of that nature. So I like to think of it as both of those being a continuum, right? And not necessarily representing like just biologically male or female, but representing different energies that we all have and that we all have in varying degrees. And the word untha itself translates to female, right? But I'm just talking about the Arabic meaning of the word, where it comes from in Arabic, what it means in Arabic. But Allah knows best. That's a whole different study. Let's look at chapter 20, verse 87 and 88. Because what I want to share with you here is how Adam, okay, let's go back to the original point so I can try to bring you up to speed on this verse of why I'm sharing this verse. Because when it came to Adam, he said he whispered to him, Ilayhi. But when he mentioned both of them, he said, Lahuma. He whispered for them, for both of them. So my point is, when it comes to these social relationships, that he whispered to Adam, but the point was not just to obtain Adam, but the point was to obtain both of them. So perhaps through their mutual influence on each other, their relationship, right? Things of that nature. So look how this works in social relationships. Look at same chapter, but we're going to look at verse 87 and 88. So it's talking about a Samiri. So who is a Samiri, and what is the story behind a Samiri? Something we can study another time. But just briefly, he has a connection with the story of Musa and Musa's people, and he made the calf for the people. But look at how the Quran describes it. فَكَذَلِكَ أَلْقَى السَّامِرِي. It says, the end of verse 87 says, likewise did a Samiri suggest. And then look at verse 88. Verse 88 says, فَأَخْرَجَ لَهُمْ عِجَلًا جَسَدًا لَهُ خُوَارٌ. A Samiri brought out for them a calf as a body, as a material body. So he made a calf for them. Lahu khuwar. It had a mooing sound. Faqalu. So they said, I think TikTok's about to make me solve a puzzle. Make sure I'm a human. What do you mean unable to verify? Did it verify that time? Good. TikTok. Okay. So listen to how this says in verse 88. فَأَخْرَجَ لَهُمْ عِجَلًا جَسَدًا لَهُ خُوَارٌ. It says that a Samiri brought out for them, or made for them, a calf as a material body that has a mooing sound. فَقَالُوا. So they said, هَذَا إِلَهُكُمْ. This is your God. وَإِلَهُ Musa. And the God of Musa, فَنَسِي. So he is forgotten. Musa forgot. Now, at first glance, that might not seem like much, but I want you to really think about this wording. Think about this wording real quick. He brought out for them a calf in the form of a body that has a mooing sound, and they said, this is your God. Who brought the calf? Who made the calf? Yeah, who made the calf? Samiri, right? Who said, this is your God? The people. Notice that? Listen to it again really closely. فَأَخْرَجَ لَهُمْ عِجَلًا جَسَدًا لَهُ خُوَارٌ. He brought out for them a calf as a body which has a mooing sound. فَقَالُوا. So they said, this is your God. فَقَالُوا. They said, this is your God. Samiri brought out the calf. The people are the ones who supported it and said, this is your God. So I wanted to share this verse with you to show you the power of social interactions, of social influences. Because the people aren't the ones who produced the God. It was Samiri. A Samiri produced the God. But when the God was produced, who were the ones that started arguing about it and defending it? Alhamdulillah. SubhanAllah. I'm glad you said that. Thank you. But who was the one who started to defend it and to argue for it? Was the people. فَقَالُوا هَذَا إِلَهُكُمْ. They said, this is your God. وَإِلَهُ Musa. And this is the God of Moses. They started accusing Moses. فَنَسِيَ. Moses forgot that this was his God. So a Samiri, the leader in this case, was the one who brought the God out. But once he did that, the people took it and started arguing about it. And that's exactly how social psychology works, right? You have this person, this influencer, who brings this God out for you. But as soon as they bring it out and they convince you that this is something that you should be worshiping, they don't even have to do anything else. They just sit in the background and they know the people will go out and argue for them, right? That's the danger of these social interactions. That's why we all have to think for ourselves as individuals, right? No matter what the situation is, even when it comes to me or anyone else. Like whatever we present, if it sounds like it makes sense and it's logical and it's based on, evidence, then alhamdulillah. If it fits and makes sense to you, then alhamdulillah, then go with it. But if it's something questionable, then don't go with it, no matter who says it. So I think this is a really interesting verse to go back to what happened with Adam and his Zoj. And it's in the same chapter that Adam, a shaytan whispered to Adam. But the result of the whispering was for both of them. Because once he gets one person in that social situation, then he knows that the ideas are going to spread. And then if we think about shaytan as being a part of our own self, then it's really that part of Adam that is suggesting that to him. And therefore he's spreading that idea, right? So it's just a different way of thinking about it and how to put the verses together. Why does he say in one case, فَوَسْوَسَ إِلَيْهِ, he whispered to him, but in the other verse he says, فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَا, he whispered for both of them. Okay, so that's pretty much what I want to cover today. It's a little over 3, but I want to make sure we finish that point. Hopefully that was clear. And inshallah, we'll pick up tomorrow. It'll be like part 4 of talking about shaytan. So hopefully everyone enjoyed it. We had alhamdulillah, the live schedule is 2 p.m. Eastern time every day. That's the goal, inshallah. Iyak. Inshallah. See everybody tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum. Have a good day. Alhamdulillah. Inshallah. Well, I'm gonna upload this too, so you can go watch the video, and it'll be on YouTube and Spotify. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.